Supermarket tomatoes don't just seem bland, they are. Chemical analysis from the University of Florida proved today's tomatoes have lost most of the compounds that made them taste unforgettable just a few decades ago. It isn't nostalgia. The flavor was bred out, gene by gene, in the race for perfect red orbs that could travel 1,500 miles unbruised. So how did one of nature's greatest flavors get engineered into mediocrity? And what would it take to bring real tomato taste back to your table? Inside the University of Florida's Flavor Lab, the search for answers began with a tomato sliced open, its aroma captured and measured down to the molecule. Dr. Harry Klee and his team did not trust taste alone. They needed numbers. Each tomato sample, whether a supermarket hybrid or a lumpy heirloom, was prepped, weighed, and pureed with clinical precision. The real work started at a machine called a gas chromatograph mass spectrometer, known by its letters as GCMS. This device vaporized the liquid tomato, then separated and identified every volatile compound drifting out. Each spike on the resulting chromatogram represented a single aroma molecule. Hexanal, linalool, geranylacetone, recorded in digital peaks and valleys. But chemistry alone could not decide what tasted good. In a separate room, trained sensory panelists sat in isolated booths, each calibrated to minimize distractions. They tasted coated tomato samples, rating sweetness, tartness, aroma, and overall liking on standardized scales. Every panelist's palate was tested and recalibrated between sessions using reference compounds, ensuring their ratings stayed consistent week after week. The scientists cross-referenced these scores with the chemical fingerprints from the GCMS, searching for patterns, which compounds actually made people like a tomato, and which did not matter at all. Dr. Klee's team analyzed over 100 varieties this way, logging thousands of data points for each. The process was slow, sometimes tedious, but it left no room for guesswork or nostalgia. The numbers told their own story. The heirlooms, with their wild shapes and colors, produced chromatograms crowded with tall, complex peaks, evidence of a rich, aromatic chemistry. The commercial varieties, bred for durability and uniformity, showed a landscape of missing spikes. The method was designed so every claim about flavor could be traced back to a measurable difference, one that could be seen in a lab report, not just tasted on the tongue. Only after this rigorous, double-blind process did the team begin to tally the true cost of modern breeding. Heirloom and commercial tomatoes, when lined up on a lab report, reveal a gap that numbers alone can't soften. In the University of Florida study, consumer tasters gave modern supermarket tomatoes a liking score that trailed heirlooms by a wide margin, sometimes by more than 20 points on a 100-point scale. That chemistry behind those scores is even starker. Heirloom tomatoes regularly measure between 5.5 and 7 degrees Brix, a direct readout of natural sugars. Most commercial varieties struggle to break 4.5 degrees Brix. Acidity, too, tells the same story. Heirlooms often reach titratable acidity levels of 0.35% or higher, while commercial types hover closer to 0.25%. The real shock comes in the volatile compounds, the molecules that create that unmistakable tomato aroma. Heirlooms can have up to 10 times more of these key volatiles, with some tomato smell compounds reduced by 60% to 90% in commercial fruit. One bar chart from the University of Florida study lays it out: 13 critical flavor compounds, each one dramatically lower in supermarket tomatoes than in their lumpy, misshapen ancestors. No matter how you slice the data, sugars, acids, aroma, modern tomatoes fall short. These numbers are not artifacts of memory or nostalgia. They are confirmed in double-blind taste panels, chemical assays, and repeated tests across more than 100 varieties. The flavor deficit is real, measured, and visible on every graph the scientists produced. When a tomato bred for shipping is put side by side with one bred for taste, The gulf is wide enough to see in a chromatogram and taste in a single bite. The question is not whether flavor was lost. The numbers demand a new question. How did we let it happen? By the late 1940s, tomato growers faced a new kind of pressure. Fields that once served local markets now supplied cities hundreds, even thousands of miles away. A tomato picked at sunrise in Florida might not reach a supermarket shelf in Chicago or New York for more than a week. The numbers were daunting. A single shipment could travel 1,500 miles before anyone took a bite. To survive that journey, fruit needed to be tough, literally. Breeders selected for tomatoes that could be picked while still green, stacked in crates, and shipped cross-country without bruising or splitting. Each step in the process favored hard, dense fruit with thick skins and firm walls. The logic was simple. Softer, juicier tomatoes, often the best tasting, were crushed under their own weight or arrived at their destination as a leaky mess. Growers, facing losses from spoilage and damage, demanded varieties that could handle the ride. The industry responded with new hybrids designed for maximum yield and resilience. These tomatoes ripened off the vine, often in packed warehouses, their color triggered by a dose of ethylene gas rather than by sunlight and time. The result was a tomato that looked perfect, shipped well, and lasted longer on the shelf. This was the era of the green pick protocol. Fruit was harvested before it had a chance to develop full flavor, then shipped in refrigerated trucks and ripened artificially after arrival. The system made sense for logistics: less waste, more profit, and a steady supply year-round. But every gain in durability came with a trade-off. The traits that protected tomatoes from bruises and rot also meant less time on the vine, less natural sugar, and fewer of the compounds that make a tomato smell and taste like summer. The priorities were clear: yield, appearance, and shelf life. Flavor was never part of the contract. The decisions made in fields and breeding labs during this period set the stage for the genetic shortcuts that would follow, laying the groundwork for a tomato built to travel, not to taste. The discovery of the uniform ripening mutation promised a revolution for tomato growers. With this single gene, breeders could guarantee a tomato that blushed evenly, top to bottom, every time. No more streaks of green around the stem, no more guesswork in the fields. Harvest crews could sweep through rows, picking every fruit at once, confident that each tomato would look identical in the supermarket bin. The appeal was obvious to anyone shipping produce across state lines or stacking crates in a warehouse. Uniform color meant fewer rejections, faster sorting, and a product that looked as good in Chicago as it did in Florida. But the mutation came with a hidden cost. The gene responsible for uniform ripening didn't just change the color, it rewired how the tomato ripened from the inside out. In a normal tomato, patches of green near the stem are packed with chloroplasts, the tiny engines of photosynthesis. These green zones keep making sugars even as the fruit turns red, sweetening the tomato until the very end. The uniform ripening gene strips away those chloroplasts early, leaving the fruit with a smooth, even color, but robbing it of its last chance to make sugar. Lab tests confirmed the impact. Tomatoes with the uniform ripening mutation consistently showed lower Brix readings, a direct measure of sugar content, compared to their old-fashioned cousins. The difference wasn't subtle. In some side-by-side trials, the sugar gap reached a full degree Brix or more, enough to change the taste from sweet and lively to flat and bland. The fruit looked perfect, but the flavor was hollowed out. This was never the intention. Breeders wanted a tomato that shipped better and sold faster, not one that tasted worse. But by focusing on appearance, they discarded a key part of the tomato's natural chemistry. Every uniform, glossy tomato on the shelf is a reminder of that trade, a gene for beauty, paid for with sweetness. Denise Tiemann spent years dissecting the chemistry of tomato aroma, hunting for the molecules that make a tomato smell like itself. Her research team cataloged more than 400 volatile compounds in tomatoes, tiny evaporating chemicals that rush to your nose the moment you slice into ripe fruit. These volatiles are the invisible foundation of flavor, responsible for the burst of freshness and the sweet green tang that define a real tomato. But in modern varieties, many of these compounds are missing. The University of Florida's analysis found that 13 of the most important aroma compounds are dramatically reduced in commercial tomatoes, with some tomato smell molecules down by as much as 90% compared to heirlooms. The damage does not stop with breeding. Once a tomato leaves the field, the cold chain takes over. Supermarket tomatoes are chilled for shipping and storage, often kept below 12 degrees Celsius, about 54 degrees Fahrenheit, sometimes for weeks. Tiemann's work revealed a hard threshold. Below 12 degrees Celsius, the genes responsible for making volatiles shut down. The fruit's ability to produce aroma compounds is switched off by the cold, and the effect lingers. Even after 3 days back at room temperature, those lost volatiles do not return. The flavor, once erased by chilling, is gone for good. This is not just a matter of taste, it is a molecular event. Chilling triggers epigenetic changes, chemical signals that silence the genes for volatile synthesis. The fruit's own machinery for making aroma is locked down, and the result is a tomato that smells and tastes flat, no matter how red or firm it looks. The numbers are stark. Tomatoes exposed to cold can lose up to 90% of their key aroma compounds. That is why a tomato left on the kitchen counter fills the room with scent, while one from the refrigerator barely smells at all. The science is clear and the loss is measurable. Modern breeding stripped away the genes for flavor, and cold storage finishes the job. The result is a tomato engineered to survive the journey from farm to supermarket, but at the cost of the very thing that makes it worth eating. The next step is to see how these losses play out in the real world, on the plate, in the kitchen, and in every bite. On a kitchen counter, 2 plates stand ready, one with a supermarket tomato, the other with an heirloom, each sliced thick and labeled only by a code. The taste test begins without preamble. Tasters reach for the first wedge, eyes closed, chewing slowly. There is a pause, then a shrug. The words come out flat, watery, bland, maybe a little sour. The next bite, from the second plate, draws a different reaction. Brows lift, heads tilt. Someone laughs in surprise. Descriptions tumble out, sweet, tangy, rich, almost floral. One taster lingers on the aroma, inhaling at the cut edge, searching for the scent that is missing from the first sample. Nobody in the room knows which tomato is which. The only clues are in the taste and the smell. When the plates are switched and the process repeats, the results hold. The supermarket tomato is called out as firm but flavorless. The heirloom is compared to fruit from a backyard garden or to a memory of summer. Tasters reach for more slices of the heirloom, leaving the other plate mostly untouched. The verdict is not subtle or polite. Even those who usually buy tomatoes at the store find themselves reaching for words like real, fresh, and alive. The supermarket tomato is described as just red and wet. The heirloom is sweet, complex, like a tomato should taste. Some tasters are surprised by how big the difference feels. Bigger than they expected, even after hearing the science. The numbers from the lab become personal, each bite a confirmation of what the chromatograms and flavor panels already showed. In this blind test, the gap between the 2 tomatoes is obvious. The heirloom wins not by a narrow margin, but by a landslide of senses: aroma, sweetness, acidity, the way the flavor lingers after swallowing. The experience leaves an impression that cannot be erased by data alone. The best science in the world can measure a flavor deficit, but only a bite can make it real. For anyone who has ever wondered if the old tomatoes really tasted better, the answer is now on the tip of the tongue. Restoring tomato flavor begins with seeds passed down through generations. Heirloom varieties, Brandywine, Cherokee Purple, Mortgage Lifter, survived decades of industrial breeding because gardeners and small farmers saved them for taste, not appearance. Brandywine's flesh is dense and almost wine-like, while Cherokee Purple brings a smoky sweetness and deep color. Mortgage Lifter, with its pink, beefy slices, owes its name to a mechanic who paid off his mortgage by selling the plants. These tomatoes often look irregular, sometimes even battered, but their flavor is unmistakable. Gardening does not require acres of land. Even a few pots on a balcony can yield tomatoes that recall summer at its peak. Cherry and grape types like Sun Gold and Black Cherry avoided much of the blandness bred into supermarket varieties. Their fruit bursts with sweetness, thriving in containers or small plots. For those seeking both flavor and resilience, breeders have responded. Dr. Harry Klee's team at the University of Florida developed the Garden Gem, bred to restore lost flavor genes while still holding up during transport. Campari tomatoes, available in some grocery stores, were chosen for sweetness and aroma, not just shelf life. Shopping choices shape the future of flavor. Farmers markets lead the revival, with vendors picking tomatoes at peak ripeness, sometimes hours before the sale. The scent at the stem end signals real flavor. If there is no aroma, there is little taste. Supermarket labels that say vine ripened often mean the fruit was left on a stem for shipping, not that it ripened in the sun. True flavor comes from tomatoes that finish ripening on the plant, never in a refrigerated truck. At home, the rule is simple: never refrigerate ripe tomatoes. Cold destroys the compounds responsible for taste, and the loss is permanent. Heirloom tomato sales now grow by 15 to 20% each year. Taste is returning as a priority. Each saved seed, each backyard harvest, each local purchase adds to the comeback. The path to better tomatoes runs through everyday choices. Today, the choice between bland and bursting with flavor sits in every market and garden. As scientists restore lost genes and heirlooms gain ground, taste is finally driving demand. The tomato's true essence survives wherever flavor, not shelf life, decides what we grow and buy. Rediscovering it is not nostalgia, it is reclaiming what never should have been surrendered. What will you put on your plate next summer?